Hi, Timea.
Hi.
Hello, hello. So I'm very happy to have you here for our interview today, which I'm very excited focuses on the subject of your research around a succession in small and medium-sized enterprises. And as far as I know, your research used different models to look at successions, amongst them emotional and social intelligence, the Barrett values assessment, and also Peter Koenigs' principle of source, or theory of source. And I would be very happy if you could give us a bit more background about the research question that you started out with.
Sure. So, hi everyone, and thank you for having me on this interview. So, so the question was really simply, basically, what are the factors that influence successful founder-successor transitions in small, medium-sized organizations? And then I had two sub-questions. How do you create these conditions, and what might be a role of a coach to support these transitions between two people? In short, basically, I was curious to explore the emotional, the psychological side of succession between two people.
Wonderful. Yeah, which I think is, obviously it's something that happens all the time everywhere with successions, and we don't really give a whole lot of attention to how that can be done with grace and success. And so I think from that perspective, your research is most enlightening. So when you went through these questions and you talked to all of these founders who've gone through successions, what was the biggest discovery for you?
Yeah, so I spoke to both founders and successors. So that was one of my criteria, that I wanted to speak to ideally both partners. So I basically grouped my findings into 6 factors, of which the most important one was the founder's willingness and readiness to let go. If they are not willing or they are not ready, it's just not going to happen. And basically, so this was the most important aspect. And then the other 5 buckets, and I'm showing buckets because I've got a visual that it's kind of like a bucket of things. They basically are the contributing factors to help the founder to be willing and ready. And among those, the most important aspect is basically love, in short, for the courageous. I know we don't use love very much in organizations. In fact, it's quite an alien word, but perhaps a better way of describing for the not so brave, or people who might be a bit frightened to use the word love, is the kind of a natural flow of exchange between two people, which is voluntary. It's not forced. It's willingly exchanging energies, and in this case, a handover between two people. So it's an easy flowing exchange is what we were looking for. So was my biggest discovery.
Wonderful. And I actually, I love that you use the word love. I think it is way beyond the time where we should become very comfortable with that word in the organizational space. As you were talking, I was actually wondering, did you also interview couples, sort of founder, successor, where the handover didn't work?
Yes, so I had a pair where the succession didn't happen at all, and I had another one where I had stories within a family, 3 generations, basically unsuccessful transitions in a company that was 100 years old. So there I wasn't able to talk to all the parties, but the gentleman who was sharing the story was the 3rd generation owner of the company, basically. So, and in fact, I would say I learned the most from the unsuccessful transitions.
And you put that in a nutshell, sort of what did you learn about, oh my God, this is what you should never do?
Well, basically, the bottom line is that when this flow of exchange wasn't there, or it was blocked, or love was replaced by fear, it didn't happen. That's just really the long and short of it. So when this flow of exchange was present, there was energy, that was love, that was exchange between the partners and the parties. It was easy, it was flowing, it was natural, it was intuitive. And there was, in some ways, this was blocked, it didn't happen. And the founder wasn't able to let go, took the company with them to the grave, or they're still holding on to it and not able to move on.
That is really, really fascinating. And I'm very intrigued also by your observation how fear then becomes truly a limiting factor, even for something that you might have created out of all the best intentions. But if your fear is too strong, then not good for the thing that you put into the world.
Yeah, and I think this is, well, when people are interested in coming to the masterclass, perhaps when I'm talking a bit more detail, I will talk about the stories that I heard from the various participants. And in that, I talk particularly about that series of exchange between family members, and fear was so much present, where the successor or the founder and then the predecessor didn't or wasn't willing to hand over their role and the company to their successor. It's a fascinating story in many cases.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm very much looking forward to our masterclass as well and what we can learn from you there. And Timea, since a lot of our readers are not necessarily founders themselves, I'm curious, what would you say, how are your findings relevant to employees and organizations, let's say, right? So for people who do work in systems that were founded by somebody at some point, but who not necessarily founders themselves, how do they matter?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So to be honest, I think it's relevant for everyone in every organization, because we often move on and we hand over our role, or we hand over a project that you've been leading or participating in. And I can count on one hand probably 3 times in my life when I was actually able to hand over a job to someone. It was never enough time. I was always yanked out to move on to something else, on the next role. So there's a lot of knowledge get lost, as well as the energy that you put in. And then you kind of watching from the distance, your work sort of fizzling away, and you're dying inside that all the things that you put in is just not happening or not moving forward. And also the other way, when you are receiving a project from someone, you are the successor basically, and that person perhaps wasn't willingly moving on to somewhere else, or they went away too quickly, then you're trying to sort of figuring out, how am I going to, do I need to then start again from scratch? And that's what often happens, that you need to sort of scratch everything and start again. So from a succession point of view, to do succession well and hand over that energy that the initiator created is so important, because there's so much energy and money actually being wasted by having to recreate things again.
Yeah, I can, as my work, as my capacity as an organizational coach, I can absolutely underwrite that, and how many resources are squandered because we don't pay attention to the aspects. And if you were then to, let's say, give leaders in an organization advice that is sort of based in what you learned through your research, what would you tell them?
Well, so I guess there's many things actually. I would say, first of all, is to make it conscious. So prepare for your succession, allow enough time, prepare for it. And I think it's really important. So one of the factors, another one is about how the successor is being selected and by whom. So it's really important to pay attention, allow enough time, find the right successor, and prepare this handover together. And that way you will be ready to move on, because otherwise it's really difficult to move on. So often people hold on to, and this letting go process, this kind of meddling thing is still happening after. So if people really care about, and especially if they are creators of a new organization or a new function or a new project, it's even more so important, I would say. So preparation, allowing enough time, and talking home, have a coach or an advisor or a mentor who can help you to deal with the sticky stuff. Because at the end of the day, it's about an exchange between two people, and inevitably there is going to be a lot of personal things come up. So that personal development, that deep looking into what's going on for me and what's going on for the other, and being really honest about this, that needs to be facilitated by someone. It could be a third pair of hands of any kind, But that was actually one of the mitigating factors in one of the transitions when it worked really well, because they did have external support, and that was an advisor / mentor.
Yeah, wonderful. And Timea, if we once more look at organizations and leaders and organizations, how, or is there anything in your research that you think could be used to propagate successful collaboration between people in an organization that is somehow connected to your findings and your research? So we have the handover, but is there anything else that might be relevant?
Well, yes, I think the source principles themselves, which I guess we don't have time to go into, but they are basically anyone who ever takes the first step to create something, they become a source of that initiative. And if we learn about how to be a good source and how to be also a good subsource, then it allows us and teams to be able to kind of naturally figure out the roles and responsibilities within the team. It just creates a natural order or a flow of work between people, which is often what the problem in teams are. We are not clear about the structures, the roles and responsibilities. We're stepping on each other's toes. It helps to build trust and understanding in a different way. So it kind of elevates the collaboration and the performance of a team. So this is one of the lenses I use. So I think it's a really important one. And I kind of wish I'd known about this a long time ago in my corporate career. I would have eliminated a lot of mistakes I made, often as a subsource, stepping on the source's toes, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully and wholeheartedly agree with that assessment. I think we could save ourselves a lot of grief, and on the other hand, create a lot more joy if we were more conscious of those principles. Yeah. Any sort of advice you would have for people? Not everybody's employed in an organization, but even for our personal lives, do you feel there's anything that you learned from your successor founder conversations that you think would be relevant for us just as human beings, as people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, I guess I'm going to go back to the source idea again here, even though I said I wouldn't, but I think it's relevant because in every exchange that whenever we create something, we become sources of initiative. So if, for example, I want to go on holiday in Rome and it's my idea and I'm going to go to my husband and say, hey, I want to go to Rome, I become an initiator of this project and I'm a source of it. And he can come and help me book whatever cars and something, but I'm the initiator. And it is relevant. So for example, as this exchange with you and you are the source of this idea, and we needed to make sure that I work with you in a way that fulfilled the needs that you had, as well as your audience's needs. So in every exchange, there is a creator, a founder, and then a helper who comes in to makes it happen. And I think going back into my research, I think if I was to hand over that organizing process of the Rome holiday to my husband, let's say, he is then my successor, but I need to hand over and let it go energetically. Otherwise, I'm going to be fiddling with his plan all the time. And it's the most annoying micromanaging habit that you could have. So I think we do this all the time. We are sources and subsources in a lot of our engagements. We just don't know about it. We're just not aware.
Yes, and I think that's a very poignant example that probably everybody can relate to, and so important to also then not become source of something, but sort of then expect other people to fulfill it for you, right? And then not be pleased with how they do it, and then you have all of these wires crossing each other in the most horrible way, and the Rome holiday may never happen or end up being one big fight, right? I think we've all been there.
Yes, exactly. So I think from a succession point of view, whenever you hand over anything to anyone, it really the only way that I saw it work when you do it in a loving way. And so it's basically an unconditional love. So this is when it's not this romantic love we're talking about here, is that loving exchange between two people when you really are voluntarily, not forcibly, there's no coercion in here, and I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna hand this over to you. Can you please take it? But I give it with the energy. And I was looking in my interviews for that energetic shift in people when they were able to let it go and give it to someone. And I think we do this all the time in small and big ways in our lives, but sometimes not very well, in my case, or very often.
Well, and actually that might be my closing question for you, Timea. I think you've demonstrated really beautifully what you've learned through your research and how that can be applied to founders, but also to people who work in organizations and to leaders in organizations. How does it apply to your life? What did you take away as a person from this experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think so. My biggest learning was from the research process itself. At the beginning, once you submit your proposal and everything, it was clear that I'm doing this project, and I just could not find the participants. And time was running, and it was almost 2 months later, and I still couldn't find people who wanted to talk to me about it. It's such a sensitive subject. And I lost the will to live at this point. I wanted to give up, and I wanted to do something else. And I was reading about kind of intuition and synchronicity, and some of the things that I've read about what makes founders successful in creating their thing. And a lot of literature talks about really being clear about what you want, reconnecting with your needs, your values, your initial inspiration, why you wanted it in the first place, which we call it intuition or source energy or whatever you want to call it. And I completely lost that in my research at the beginning. And as I was reading about this, I said, I need to apply this to myself. And so I said, okay, let's just put all this stress and everything aside. I'm just going to go with the flow and see what happens. And I started talking to people about my research, why I'm doing it in a passionate way, really reconnected with my energy. And then I followed up with those people when I felt that there was a resonance. So paying attention to this resonance was really important. And then it's like magic happened, because within a space of about 10 days, about 2 weeks, all the participants turned up. And we know it's not magic because there is a neuroscientific evidence of how this works. But I was completely baffled by how much it worked for me too. And so this idea of energy exchange, connecting with your source, with your intuition, is basically what the nugget of my research, because I also felt it for me.
Beautiful.
I was the source of this research. And so it happens with all the sources and founders I've been interviewing. So obviously I couldn't have not found this.
Fantastic. I love that example, and how you were actually your own case study in a way of how this works and why it works. Thank you.
Exactly.
Timea, I think we'll leave it off for here today. And of course, for anybody watching this video, reading the newsletter, there will be a masterclass with Timea that I'm very excited about, where you will take us much deeper into your research and into your findings. And it will be interactive, so you will walk away with some very concrete insights for your own life and business and relationship, any place where souls applies, which is your entire life.
Exactly. Yes, I will be very happy to tell you all the stories. I'm using it normally as a storytelling workshop. So you're going to be telling stories about my interview participants. So
wonderful.
Looking forward to seeing everyone there, whoever is interested to come.
Great. Me too, Timea. Thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to the next step.
Thank you.
Thank
Me
you.
too.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.